an amazing day. We have a heck of a stream planned for you today. I am very excited about this one. We are going to have some special guests here today, some very, very amazing people who we've talked about here, and the people that they're representing have been doing incredible work that is very important to us and our country. And so we're excited to talk to them about it, and we're going to do a little bit of a preview. We're going to outline what we're going to be diving into today. But before we do, we always like to make sure the tubes are connecting themselves all across the fruited plain of the interwebs. It's a beautiful Friday, my friends. It's great to see you. Hopefully your week is coming to a nice, easy close. We had a very busy week ahead. We're not done yet. We're diving into some good stuff. Today, we are going to be speaking with the folks from Empower Oversight, baby. You know them. You remember this logo. We've talked about them before. We've read through their filings. We've listened to the people that they're representing. And so today they're going to be here on the show. And there's some good stuff that we're talking about. So I want to get into it. But this is where you can follow them. We've got a bunch of links down in our description below. You can check them out at defendwhistleblowers.com, Empower Oversight. The gentlemen that we'll be speaking with here today are Jason Foster, seen here. He is the founder of Empower Oversight, and so he's going to be joining us in a second. But what you'll notice here is he used to be the chief investigative counsel for the Senate Judiciary Committee for Chuck Grassley. We love Chuck Grassley here. And so that is just a ton of fun, and we'll hear from him. He's worked closely on these issues for some time. And the other gentleman who will be here is Tristan Leavitt, baby. We're excited to talk to him because he is also going to be testifying in front of Congress, in front of the House of Representatives, the Judiciary Committee, coming up very soon. Next week, I think. Oh my gosh, that's very soon. So he'll be testifying in front of Congress. He's the president for Empower. And so we're going to have both the founder and the president here joining us today. We're very excited about that. Now, let me give you a preview of some of the items that we're going to discuss. We're going to zoom in on this. Of course, we're going to learn about what the organization does and what they have been doing. But there are a lot of current issues they're working on that are forward-looking, right? We're going into the future, trying to uncover more corruption. And so they represent whistleblowers, and this is an interesting one. So this just got drafted fresh out of the oven, and you can see we're talking about this FBI staff operations specialist, this guy called Marcus Allen. But in this 22-page document, there is a lot of meat and potatoes, a lot of really juicy bits that show really how problematic our FBI ultimately is. And we have talked about this fella right here. Remember this guy, Jeffrey Veltri, same person we talked about, I think it was earlier this week or maybe earlier last week, but very recently, he came back into the news because he is leading the Miami field office in the second Trump assassination attempt. So we've got now multiple assassinations that we have to number as we cover politics in America. But Jeffrey Veltri was also involved in a bunch of other really shady stuff. And what we're going to see here is they came up with this Trump questionnaire. Okay, so the FBI was sending out these questions or kind of filtering through the agents in order to extract or eliminate, to purge, might be the better word, the individuals who were not in on the FBI's cause. And we have a lot of criticisms for the FBI. And so you can see this is a monster complaint. We're going to go through this. It's actually a letter that's going into the Honorable Jim Jordan at the Judiciary Committee because Tristan's going to be testifying in front of the Judiciary Committee. The Weaponization Committee next week. So we're going to hear from him first. We'll get a little bit of a preview on what's inside, but this is just, there's some juicy bits in here. They're going after Catholics. They're going after people who have maybe a religious objection, a moral objection to what the FBI is doing. They're weaponizing security clearance processes. There's a segment in here about Paul Abbate, who is scolding and going after FBI agents who dare to disagree with what their plans are to investigate January 6th. And so there's a lot of meat and potatoes in there. And so we're very excited to talk about that. And then we've got another item that is also a fun one. This one involves, you remember Hunty Poo, old Hunty Biden? Well, a little bit back in the picture here because you remember his attorney, his name was Abbe Lowell. And Abbe Lowell has been around for a long time in a lot of the Hunter Biden shenanigans that we've covered here. And so now what's happening is Abbe Lowell, the defense attorney for Hunter, really been representing the Biden crime family for a long time. We've covered a lot of his litigation. He's now a defendant. Oh, no. For Abbe Lowell, he doesn't like that very much. But guess who is bringing this complaint against him? Yeah, you recognize those names. Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler. Remember those two guys? The IRS whistleblowers. Oh, yeah, that's right. Because they were blowing the whistle on the DOJ and how corrupt the DOJ was, in our opinion. That's our words. We're going to use a lot of colorful language here. I will not ascribe it to the Empower Oversight folks, but we'll own that. But it is a lot of corruption, and this is way, way beyond just the Biden crime family, right? A lot of us are sitting here thinking to ourselves, well, Hunter Biden is going to be old news because Joe Biden is not around anymore. This is a much deeper and bigger problem. This is something that is indicative of a corrupt DOJ that is covering up for certain people and allowing other people to be prosecuted, or not allowing it, actually encouraging and orchestrating the prosecution of others. We want equal justice. We don't want the DOJ that is covering up for their people in power, and then allowing their people in power and their lawyers to go out there and libel these brave whistleblowers. And so you remember who these whistleblowers are. These two guys, we talked a lot about them here. Shapley and Ziegler, testifying and exposing a lot of the corruption and the problems that we talk a lot about here. So we're going to be talking with the Empower folks, and we've got all their links down in the description below. And if you want to support them, I would really encourage you to do that. So we'll come back and we'll revisit this and talk about where the donos and the money is going. But this stuff costs a lot. It costs a lot to actually fund this litigation, and they're working hard. And so if you can, the link is down in the description below. It's defendwhistleblowers.com. It'll take you right here. But be sure that you go in and give a dono. And if you can't make a dono, well, we made one on behalf of the Watching the Watchers fam, because we really want to keep these guys going, because we talk a lot about here. We ask questions here all the time. We say all the time, where are our good lawyers? Where are the smart lawyers on our side standing up for American principles, where the other side has, like billionaires just dumping funds, Zuckerberg, $100 million into all these entities? Like, what's going on? So we have to support the people on our side. And we're doing that here, Empower Oversight. All the links are in the description below. And so we're going to jump in and have a conversation with them here in 1 second. But before we do, we also want to talk about another amazing company out there who's doing some good work and keeping us protected against censorship. You know who we're talking about. And I'm very excited to be sharing this with you today. Rumble, baby. We've got Rumble in the house, and I want to share with you what they're working on, because this is important to the survival of Rumble, literally. When they first started in 2013, they built a platform for the small creator. That's guys like me. They didn't have censors, or they didn't have biases, and we were able to come over there, and they treated us fairly. And we created a channel over there in the middle of COVID because we were facing censorship. We were facing a lot of difficulty. They were striking our channel and so on. But Rumble now is standing firm. Facebook fell to the pressure. Rumble was under attack. They attacked corporate media, right? Anybody who didn't bow down to the censorship during COVID, they were coming after them. Even countries came after people like France and elsewhere. But Rumble is sticking around, fighting for free speech. And we love our Rumble friends. We stream there every day. But Rumble is not going to survive just with brand advertisers, just the sponsor stuff, right? They don't get much of the ad revenue from that. And so one thing that they're very excited about is Rumble Premium, as you can see this on your screen. You can survive, Rumble can survive, you can help them survive by joining Rumble Premium. And if you're watching us on Rumble right now, this might be a good thing for you to do, because it's going to help support them. And they're very, very much in alignment with free speech. A lot of people are over there. A lot of people have been canceled all over the place. They're on Rumble right now. And so we're excited to say that Rumble, if you sign up for Rumble Premium using our code RG10, when you purchase your annual subscription over on Rumble, well, then you're going to save $10 off your annual subscription. And so, like I said, if you got the means and you enjoy free speech like we do, and you want to support a company who is out there fighting for free speech, check it out. The link is down in the description. Use RG10 when you sign up for Rumble Premium. You'll get an annual pass. You'll save $10 and you'll be supporting a great company. And if you can't sign up over there for Rumble Premium, no problem. We're just happy that you're watching us over there on Rumble, because we've had a lot of difficulty here on YouTube. They demonetized our entire channel after January 6th. Multiple strikes for election misinformation, medical misinformation during COVID and elsewhere. And so we're grateful for Rumble. So check them out. All right, links are in the description below. And so, my friends, thanks for supporting Rumble. Thanks for supporting the work that they're doing. But now we want to get into some fun stuff on the day. So we're very, very excited. Today, we've got the two gentlemen who are making things happen at a whistleblower and research organization called Empower Oversight. They're here to talk us through two very interesting issues that they're working on and catch us up to speed on some of the other stuff that is in the pike, in the hopper. And so I want to welcome aboard our friends Jason Foster and our friends Tristan Leavitt. And so we've got them in the house, and let's make sure that this one is working. It's booting up. It's booting in there. All right, we just had that working like 2 seconds ago. We just tested this before the show started. But Tristan's feed is not working. All right, let me test this here. Let's try a different way. Nope. All right, so he's going to reboot. But we've got Jason Foster from Empower Oversight. Good to see you, my friend. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing? Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, really good to see you. We're going to see if we can bring Tristan back in. There it is. All right, now it's working. Perfect.
Hey.
Who knows what it was? But welcome, Tristan. Good to have you on the show, brother.
Great to be on. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, really glad that you guys are here. So as we were detailing as the show was getting started, you guys have been up to a lot. You've been very busy. We've covered a lot of your stuff on the show. Been very excited to do that. So the fact that we're able to have this conversation here is awesome. So thanks for your time here today. But I think maybe, Jason, can you kind of refresh our recollection here, right? We talk a lot about a lot of different things. There's whistleblowers. There's many different congressional hearings and stuff like that. What have you guys been working on that you can bring us up to speed on?
Right. Well, so the thing that people are probably most familiar with is the IRS whistleblowers, right, in the Hunter Biden investigation. These were two folks in the IRS. They were career criminal investigators. They handled the Hunter Biden investigation from the very beginning, followed all the rules, handled it, confidentially the way they're supposed to. Worked on it for one of them for 5 years. One of them supervised it for 3 years, starting in 2022. So, or in 2020. And so, we ended up representing them because they wanted to come forward and talk about all the hurdles and the shenanigans that were going on behind the scenes. And they wanted to let Congress and the inspectors general and, the oversight authorities know that DOJ wasn't playing it down the middle, right? They had their thumb on the scale for the defendant at every turn, doing things like, tipping off the defense counsel before a search warrant was executed. Saying that we couldn't put Hunter's, or President Biden's name or Hunter's name in a search warrant application, things that they just wouldn't do for anybody else, right? There was a two-tiered system of the investigation, right? And there were roadblocks in put in front of them in terms of, anything that might lead to the big guy or the father, the current sitting president. So we helped them bring those concerns forward to the proper authorities through the proper channels using the whistleblower protection statutes. And all that came out when the House of Representatives voted to release their private to the public. And that happened, last summer. They got a lot of attention. And then Abbe Lowell, the lawyer for Hunter Biden, throughout this process, as they learned that these guys were coming forward, he was behind the scenes trying to get the Justice Department, trying to get his client's father's Justice Department, right, to prosecute the guys who were blowing the whistle on the kid glove treatment that the Justice Department and the IRS were giving to his client. He didn't want people to know, right? He wanted the plea deal that they almost got through. There was that, aborted sweetheart plea deal. He had everything wired. He had it all worked out. So he's trying behind the scenes for almost a year to get somebody to either investigate our clients, prosecute our clients, claim that they did something wrong, because it's illegal to release someone's private tax information.
Okay, so let's pause for just a quick second. So
Yeah.
just to catch people up, because there's a lot that's going on. And so let me see if I can get this. I want to share this screen. Let me figure out how to do that. Okay, so you're talking about these two gentlemen, right? So this is Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler, and they were with the IRS, right? They're not a part of the DOJ, but they're working with the DOJ, and the DOJ's investigating the Biden crime family, kind of. And then you said that something, I mean, they were officially, right? We say kind of because of some of the things that you mentioned, like they were warning him about the search of the storage facility before before they actually searched the facility. They called his lawyers emptied it out. We're like, okay, is that really what any defendant gets the benefit of the doubt for a situation like that? You get the warning like that? No. So you were saying that then something happened.
They wouldn't approve a search warrant for the Delaware residence, which they had probable cause for. They admitted they had probable cause for, but the AUSA on that killed it, saying it was wouldn't be good optics. I mean, that's the same Delaware residence where the classified documents were found, right?
Right.
Eventually, later, right?
So then these guys, there's a process by which they're doing their jobs. They're IRS people. They see criminality in action. They start to see a cover-up essentially is happening, my words. And then they are causing some difficulty essentially. And so you're saying that Abbe Lowell, which is Hunter's private defense attorney, Hunter Biden's basically private lawyer, is then trying to smear them to defend his client and trying to interfere with the investigation?
Yeah. He's coming. I think it's important to understand the context that for IRS agents, there are very strict taxpayer privacy laws. And we want that, right? We don't want them out there revealing taxpayer information or stuff, right? Most of us, are not maybe huge fans of the IRS, right? And they're an agency to be feared, right? And so there are these strict laws, but there's also an exception in the whistleblower statutes to protect individuals who go to Congress. And Congress made that explicit in the late 90s, saying we want to make clear to the IRS and anyone else that although we have passed these strict taxpayer privacy laws, here's a circumstance where you can come directly to the tax committees in Congress to let us know if there's misconduct in tax investigations.
Got it.
And that's the process that we help them to navigate. That picture is from a public hearing, but initially it had to be all behind the scenes. We had to get, clearance from the tax committees to be able to receive the protected information. Originally, we testified behind closed doors. There were closed door interviews. So Abbe Lowell's argument was, Abbe Lowell just basically ignored this whistleblower. Ignore the man behind the curtain. All you need to know is there's these taxpayer privacy laws and they're violating them. And so that's what he was out there arguing, that they were committing felonies by going to Congress and sharing this taxpayer information, but just totally disregarding the whistleblower laws that are exactly, were created exactly for a purpose like this.
Right. Our clients didn't release any taxpayer privacy information, and he knows that, right? It's the House of Representatives that voted to release it. And people may remember they have that authority. They did that with Trump's tax returns, right? So, nobody disputes that the House committees, the House tax committees have the right to receive taxpayer private information and to vote to release it publicly. That's exactly what they did to Trump, right? And so they're the ones who released it, not our clients. But Abbe Lowell is going around telling everyone that our clients violated the law by releasing something that they didn't release.
Okay, so Abbe's complaint is that Congress essentially leaked some of this information out, and then Congress is beyond recourse, so there's no, they can't sue them. Right. So then the next best thing is for Abbe Lowell to then, I guess we can go through the complaint.
Yeah. So behind the scenes last summer, what he really wants is to push back on the whistleblowers behind the scenes. He wants to utilize his client's father's Justice Department. So he's sending information, sending letters to them saying, you should prosecute these guys, because then it's not Abbe Lowell doing it, then it's the Justice Department. It's the whole might of the federal government.
So prosecute them for something they didn't do, right? Which is leak or release these materials, which Congress did.
Right.
Exactly.
So I think they should go after them. So then Congress calls them out because there are rumblings in the press saying, referring to these behind the scenes letters from Abbe Lowell to the government. So Congress writes a letter in September of last year, a year ago, saying, we're hearing that you've done this. You need to produce all of this documentation. And so he comes forward and does. He sends a letter and says, fine, I'm releasing all of this material, and just so the public has a record, I'm giving it all to the public as well. And we know that he shared it with reporters. And so that's why a few days ago, right, we came up on a 1-year statute of limitations. for him releasing these allegations, making them public, and including in there these allegations that the IRS whistleblowers, our clients, committed these felonies. Shortly after that, he did sue, kind of having been called on the carpet. It looks a little silly if you're like, you're caught going behind, going to try and go to the principal, right? Say, oh, go look at these guys. So he it seems really just kind of cover, as a safe face motion, he then filed a lawsuit just a few days later against the IRS, naming the whistleblower, saying, well, they violated all this, but the recourse in the law, right? Federal agents are usually immune for their official actions. And so the recourse in the law for the taxpayer privacy statute is to file a lawsuit against the IRS. So we've been trying to get to intervene in that case to be able to defend the interests of the IRS whistleblowers, because the government is not. When he first filed that lawsuit, we almost laughed because, again, we knew that we had done nothing wrong, right? We followed the law to a T. And so it was like, okay, you're just going to file this thing. And then when the Justice Department responded, rather than saying, no, actually, there's a whole entire exception in the taxpayer privacy law for whistleblowers, the Justice Department didn't mention it at all. They completely ignored that. And so at that point, we realized, this was a problem. And so we have moved to intervene in that case. But so it's really, because the Justice Department and the IRS have aligning interests with Hunter Biden and Abbe Lowell in refusing to let us intervene, that's a big part of what pushed these guys to have to file this defamation lawsuit. There's no other way for them to vindicate their name if the government and Abbe Lowell are going to oppose them getting involved in this lawsuit. They could lose their jobs, of course, if there's a finding that they violated, which again, there should not be, but if the Justice Department isn't going to actually be vigorously defending the government, right, then they could take a dive. They could say, well, we'll just settle this. We'll just admit that they did wrong, because they don't have any interest to look out for these guys. So that's a real problem.
Right. So Abbe Lowell, just to be clear, there's a lot of cross lawsuits and parties, right? So if we have Abbe Lowell then who's suing the IRS, the same
on behalf of Hunter Biden.
On behalf of Hunter, who's the same guy, right? Hunter's daddy runs the executive branch. So now we have these almost like this fake opposition that we're seeing between Hunter and the IRS. It's the same pattern that we talk a lot about here. We see the same pattern everywhere. And in fact, we talked about this yesterday in Arizona, where we have a so-called Republican county recorder who sues the very liberal secretary of the Maricopa County Secretary of State, essentially. And they're faking like they have opposed interest, but they do not, right? They actually are probably going to settle this, and it's going to be adverse to the people who have an interest in this. So you guys are moving then. So this is a separate claim. So we've got your complaint, which is on behalf of the whistleblowers. So the whistleblowers through Empower Oversight are filing, and this is a sizable sum. I believe it's $20 million towards Abbe Lowell. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep, a defamation suit filed against him personally, not against Hunter, against Abbe Lowell, because Abbe Lowell is the one who republished in a non-privileged way, in other words, directly to the press, directly to the public, not in a court filing, not in some privileged way. He republished all those previous letters where he was trying to get DOJ IG, the Deputy Attorney General. He was trying to prosecution of our clients, right?
Scary thought right there. Just to pause on that for a second, right? This is the president's son's lawyer begging the DOJ, which Joe Biden runs, to prosecute the whistleblowers who are making the family look bad. And this guy's, and I haven't seen these, but you're saying Abbe Lowell's firing off these letters to prosecute your clients, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes,
the
complaint alleges that these letters contain, false and defamatory statements, accusations that he knew were not true, that these guys had violated federal tax privacy law. He says things like, this isn't whistleblowing, this is a clear-cut crime. There's no exception to these laws. Right. Anybody who reads the statute, you don't have to be an expert. You can read the statute and know that there are very clear exceptions to
F5
taxpayer privacy laws.
Disclosure by whistleblower.
Right. It's not a complicated issue. Right.
And his argument or his response might be, well, you guys gave the documents to Congress and then Congress released those, so they're out in the public. But that's not what he did. He gave them to Congress, yes, but Congress didn't release these documents. It was him.
Exactly. And so he's accountable for those to the extent that they're false and defamatory, and he knew that, which is what we allege in the complaint. then he's accountable for that in a defamation claim.
Amazing. So let's take a look at the complaint, and then you guys please stop me, pause me, as we'll run through this one if you want to chime in or something. But I want to just show people what's going on and how it works, and then maybe we can talk about that's not it. That's it. All right. Maybe we can talk about the damages, and I'm interested in kind of the personal side of all this. I mean, I got to imagine that Shapley and Ziegler are just been put through the ringer on this. It's like, oh my gosh. I remember when I started speaking out about some just legal issues right back during COVID and some of these things, it was like attorneys were coming out of the woodwork to say I was an idiot and kind of throw me out of the profession because I was talking about stuff. I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but I would imagine, I'm sure you have, but I would imagine that Shapley and Ziegler are going through it too. And so we'll put a pin in that. We'll come back to that. But here is some background on this. So we'll run through this, and then you guys please feel free to chime in. It is 11 pages filed in the District of Columbia. Oh, and I think this is a good moment to talk about the judge. Is this
Sure.
appropriate? I think you can give us some background. When we talk about the DC court, we get very nervous, obviously, because we've had some pretty bad cases out of there. In particular, we're talking about the Judge Chutkan case, the January 6th case, where we have some very bad rulings, and we've had a bunch of bad J6 rulings out of DC. And so what's your take on the position where this case is currently in DC? Is it a lost cause at the moment just because we're filing there, or how does it sit?
No, well, it was originally assigned to Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who you're probably familiar with from a lot of the other filings that you've read. She actually presided over the Fast and Furious controversy that both Tristan and I worked on back in the early 2010s.
And I think we referenced her as the Clinton sock drawer case. Is that I think she did the...
Oh, she that one too? Okay.
I think she may have done that one too, which was about presidential records and things like that.
Yeah. So, well, she sort of split the baby in half on the dispute between Congress and the executive branch on the records over Fast and Furious. Made them give over some of them, but then let them keep a lot of them secret as well. But so it was originally assigned to her, but then it was just recently, the other day, was randomly reassigned to Judge Leon. Richard Leon. And he's a Bush appointee. He's been a congressional lawyer, which is interesting. So he's done the same, job that we did on Capitol Hill. He's done congressional oversight. So that's just interesting given the subject matter. And he also happens to be the judge who presided over the case where Fusion GPS was trying to prevent its bank from turning over its bank records to the House Intelligence Committee under Devin Nunes. And he did not allow them to stop that subpoena. And that's how the world knows, right, that the DNC funded the Steele dossier.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a very important moment in time, right? If we didn't have that one decision, we would know a lot less, maybe nothing about that. So that's good news. That's good news. So we're glad that it landed with a good judge so far. So here is what the complaint says. Of course, we're talking about Gary Shapley. He's a citizen of Maryland. We've got Ziegler of Georgia, and he's a lifelong Democrat, which was always an interesting feature of the entire development on this. And Lowell is a citizen of Washington, D.C., handles high-profile cases, and he made his defamation that was carried out in Washington, D.C. So we've got whistleblowers.
Something you might find interesting. After Gary and Joe testified publicly, right, and people asked them about their party affiliation. Gary said, "Well, I'm registered as a Republican," but he's just very middle of the road, nonpartisan. He leaves the hearing, and his mom calls him. All the rest of his family are Democrats. You're registered as a Republican?
That's funny.
That was a big revelation to her coming out of that hearing.
Yeah, there was nothing political about what these guys did, right? I mean, it was about the work. It was about they had none of those motivations, and their instructions to us when they came to us, was, no, we offer the same information to both sides, be fair to both sides. Once you go out there on something like this, though, then you sort of attract. You don't have control over the friends and enemies you attract when you get a political hot button issue.
Yeah, this polarizes everybody. Even it sounds like the family are going, what the heck? Revelations across the board. So that's interesting. And I know the politics, their political positions it did come up, but it never struck me as political. I mean, these guys were both, I think, in their positions for decades, right? Or at least Shapley was like decades.
Yeah, both of them have been for quite some time. And they're, the team that they're on is like the crack international tax investigation team for the IRS. That's why they had this case, right?
Yeah.
So Gary was Joe's supervisor. And so, a number of like very high profile cases. Gary worked on like the Credit Suisse, all this tax recoveries from Swiss banks, right? And so these guys are extremely experienced. And that's why this one stuck out at them so much, because they had never had a case treated with such kid gloves before.
Yeah. Yeah, they seemed like the A players, right? Some of the best in the government. And so for them to come out and stand behind it, and the way they testified, they were so articulate, they knew this stuff like the back of the hand, they just demonstrated competence. So it was
Gary's been responsible. He's overseen cases and worked on cases that have brought in billions of dollars from people who were cheating on their taxes and trying to hide the money overseas. So yeah, I mean, he was a rock star before all this happened.
Yeah, and then he crosses the wrong narrative, and then suddenly he's excommunicado. But I wanted to ask also, while it's on my mind, about the process a little bit that they go through before it reaches this stage. Before these guys actually contact you, or before they reach out, before it hits Congress, I guess, they're working internally with their supervisors and stuff. I mean, they're trying to solve this stuff. How does that work?
Yeah. So Gary, and it's actually pretty central to what happened, but when all throughout the case, so you've got the IRS, they're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Delaware, and then the DOJ Tax Division. So Gary is making protected disclosures up his chain of command throughout this. He's saying, these guys are not treating it the same way. They seem to be obstructing some of these inquiries. So he's putting that in reports all throughout. His supervisors were like, this is a super hot potato. We don't want anything to do with it. Like, normally you wouldn't have someone at Gary's position communicating with the U.S. Attorney for the District of Delaware. They said, yeah, you go be the one to go to those meetings. You go be the liaison. They don't want their hands.
Yeah, I remember that.
So but when things started to unravel, when David Weiss, the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, first in a meeting said, well, even though we had recommendations to charge in both D.C. and in California, we went to the D.C. U.S. Attorney, and he's really not interested. And Gary had been paying close attention.
Biden appointed D.C.
Right.
Biden appointed D.C. U.S. Attorney. But Attorney General Merrick Garland had been out there in front of Congress saying, no, this is completely non-political, and no Biden appointees weren't going to have hands on it. Weiss has got all the authority that he needs. And so for Gary, that was like a huge switch to say, you're telling me that if you don't have the control over bringing these, that contradicts what the Attorney General's been saying publicly.
Yeah.
And Congress had been breathing down Garland's neck about the case because of the obvious potential conflicts of interest, saying, how are you going to ensure that there aren't those conflicts? So in that meeting, Gary raised these issues. So he had been going internal, but that was the first time that his concerns kind of jumped over and that Weiss became aware of them. And that's when the kind of bigger retaliation started, because Weiss then said, oh, wait a minute. Okay, produce all of your emails. We want the discovery on this case. He goes through and sees Shapley's communications with his chain of command. And, from there on out, Weiss.
At that point, he realizes that Gary's been blowing the whistle to his own bosses over at the IRS.
Wow.
And then guess what? He stops getting invited to the meetings, the weekly meetings that they were having on this case for years, right? And all of a sudden, he's the supervisor of the case agent, and he's not invited anymore. They go silent. And then they're the machinations.
The case agent wasn't either, just to be clear. It wasn't just Gary, right? The whole entire team was
right.
taken, which now we know because
eventually
of investigation. Well, but even
eventually they took the whole team off.
Said no Gary, no Joe, none of the team. So they were cut out entirely from the outset, even before they knew they had been reassigned.
Yeah. So at that point, that's when Gary, to answer your earlier question, that's when Gary starts thinking, okay, wait a minute, I got to get a lawyer. I got to figure out. I gotta figure out who I can tell, how I can tell them, and so that process sort of began pretty much immediately after that meeting in August of 2022.
October of 2022.
I mean October of 2022. Yeah, October. And then so by January of the following year, he's found a lawyer. That lawyer eventually finds us to get us to help. He goes and he makes disclosures internally to the Justice Department Inspector General, to the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration, something called TIGTA, which is basically the IRS's Inspector General. So he made those disclosures privately. And then, we made the decision to reach out to Congress and say, hey, Congress, can you help us facilitate coming to you with this information? But we got a problem. Like, we need to have, in order for him to tell even his lawyers, like he had to have some kind of special authorization from the committees, and they have the authority to do that. And so they eventually did that. Both the Democrat in the Senate and the Republican chair in the House both gave letters that said, look, we want to hear what you have to say, because we couldn't, he couldn't say what it was. He just said, I have something important that I think you want to hear, but I can't tell my lawyers, and I can't get in, I need their advice to come and testify. Will you authorize me to tell their lawyer, to tell my lawyers? And so that's what he did. That's what the chairman did.
So like I said earlier, the law allows whistleblowers to go to those committees. It doesn't say anything about lawyers. There's a good argument to make that if you're seeking legal counsel, you're seeking legal advice, that you could tell your lawyers in the context of utilizing the whistleblower statute. We went above and beyond in going to Congress and saying, it's ambiguous, so we're not going to test it. Will you just clear us? We didn't necessarily have to do that, right? But we did. That's how careful we wanted to be to make sure that there was no spillage of this taxpayer privacy information. And so we got that authorization to go.
Right. And then sort of briefly go through the rest of the chronology then. So what happens at that point is they get the authorization. Then he's able to, he gets his lawyer's help legally to prepare the disclosure. They go in, they give a proffer to the committees. They say, here's what he's going to testify to. Do you want to bring him in for an interview? And then they do that all behind closed doors. It's all still protected by the tax statutes. And then the committee decided later that summer to have a vote and say, hey, the public needs to see this, or the rest of Congress needs to see this. The Judiciary Committee needs to see this, right? Because we couldn't even go to the Judiciary Committee in Congress. You have to go, the statute says you have to go to that one committee, the tax committee.
Wow.
So that's why they voted to refer it to the rest of the House, which makes it public, which intentionally and purposely, that's the same thing they did with Trump's tax returns, right? And so once they did that, then Gary and Joe were, at that point, they're just like anybody else. They have a right to talk about it. They have whistleblower protections to talk about it. As long as they're not revealing anything new that wasn't already revealed in the House, then there's nothing wrong with that. And anybody would know. I mean, that's how it works. Anybody who knows what happens with the Trump tax returns knows that, right? The members who saw the Trump's tax returns before they released them, even the members of Congress, they couldn't talk about them legally until Congress voted to release them. Then once Congress voted to release them, all those members were out there talking about it. Gary and Joe are in the exact same position.
Wow. Okay. So that is a lot. And I didn't realize the process was really that extensive. So there was a ton of stuff happening before we ever saw those guys testifying in front of Congress. I mean, it's happening for a very, very long time.
Months.
Yeah. Which there's all sorts of repercussions, consequences from that. Now from where I'm sitting, it's going to suppress anybody's willingness to be a whistleblower, right? To have to go through the ringer and all that. But these guys stayed within the system as best they could for years. And what's also interesting about this is that Shapley, right, is like an expert in this field. So he knows what he can talk about and what he can't talk about. And so he's trying to color in the lines until the retaliation starts. Then he goes through this entire process, and I'm imagining at every single step of the way, at every one of those, it's another like whack-a-mole. It's another opportunity for the bureaucracy to just knock these guys down, knock you guys out, to stop all this stuff from ever reaching the public.
Yeah, that's essentially right. I mean, it's important to understand that although it was a big step for him to go to Congress, again, that is protected. And so I think, on the one hand, we sort of like laud people who are like, well, you work within the system, right? There's kind of an ethos of like, oh, you're a company guy, good job. But certainly as former congressional staffers, Jason and I would say, look, it's important to understand that it's okay to go to Congress. There are protections for that for a reason. That's part of the constitutional separation of powers and the checks and balances there. And so that's not going outside of the system or something else. Congress set up the system. Congress is who established these various departments, right? Congress
They're also part of the system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we're glad that you guys are doing the work that you're doing, because it's a big maze of confusion, I'm sure, for people who are just working their job, in the government. They've been doing this for a long time. They see something problematic. They're trying to figure out, what do I do about it? And to have you guys help them navigate through that is a real service. So we're grateful for that. So let's jump back into this complaint. So I want to talk about Abbe Lowell a bit and his false statements. So a little bit of background on Abbe Lowell, right? He's been around for a long time. He's been representing the Hunter family. He's kind of known, I think, as an aggressive, very litigious, very colorful attorney, right? We've read a lot of his stuff on the show here. But he's also maybe colors outside the lines a bit too, right? He just got scolded in California on another case, and we were talking about that yesterday. Can you refresh our memory on that one, right? He got scolded for something.
Judge Scarzy? Yeah, well, Judge Scarzy in the criminal tax case in California, the prosecution of Hunter Biden threatened to hold, he issued what's called a show cause order.
That's right.
That basically said, explain to me why I shouldn't sanction you. Because Judge Scarzy thought some things that were in his pleadings were false, and that he wanted to hear an argument as to why he shouldn't be sanctioned, because it sure looks like you know better than what you wrote here. He ultimately didn't sanction him, to be clear. And the lawyers came back with an explanation. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way. He took that for what it's worth and didn't sanction him. But Judge Scarzy is known to be very, very strict with lawyers and the truth. So.
Well, that's good. They should be truthful in their filings to the court. And the reason I brought that up is because it feels like there's a pattern here of Abbe Lowell, who's constantly manipulating the truth, or in this case, lying about the truth, defaming people, libeling people, and even judges are noticing it, saying, "Hey, you should be a little tighter with that language. Color in the lines here." So here's what apparently he said. Right. So this is what you guys included. Let's take a look at this in this beautiful complaint. So here's the background. You say on September 14th, Lowell sent a letter, this is what you described earlier, to several congressional committees, which included many of the prior communications that Biden's lawyers had sent to the government. So these are other attorneys, I guess, from Hunter?
Chris Clark was, for a lot of this, sent some of the initial letters, although Abbe Lowell also sent some of the earlier ones.
That's right. Yeah, Chris Clark. And he was there for that original plea deal that went derailed, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And that was a scene. I don't think I'll ever forget reading that transcript here on how badly that went, because I think that Hunter, if he would have just taken that plea deal, he could have avoided a lot of this additional consequence, and the DOJ would have continued to cover up for him.
Yes.
But any thoughts on that? Any reaction to that?
I think that's exactly right. One thing that a lot of people probably don't know is, and it's almost like a 3-act play, right? A lot of people bring up the third act here and say, see, he's being punished, and he wasn't going to be. You have to go back to the earlier acts. But I think one of the kind of second act of it was that, of course, the first act is the government agreed with the IRS that Hunter Biden should be charged and all these things. Again, as we described before, he goes to these different U.S. attorneys' offices, he's rejected. The second act then is it's laying entirely quiet. So at the time Gary comes forward, there had not been any activity on the case for several months. Before they're having weekly calls, right? There's all this activity. Suddenly it's all quiet. And so when our first letter goes indicating that there's a whistleblower intending to come forward, immediately after that is when the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware first reaches out to Chris Clark to offer a plea deal. And you have the sweetheart plea deal here. Well, the initial thing that they offered required no guilty plea whatsoever. It's even sweeter than the sweetheart deal everybody saw.
Yeah, wild.
And then after that is when Weiss said, maybe that's not a great idea. And then they came forward with the one that all the public saw. But I think you're absolutely right. DOJ just want to put a box on that, put a box on ribbon and get it out.
And the timeline gets a little complicated. I think people can easily be confused about it. But what you need to understand is, because they gave that closed door testimony, and because the attorneys went in and gave an attorney proffer to both the House and the Senate, before they even came in to testify, there were lots of people, sort of in the know on the committees on Capitol Hill, and who could have that. It wasn't a secret. Certainly wasn't a secret inside the Justice Department, or even on Capitol Hill, that these guys were coming forward, that this was a process that was moving forward. It just hadn't broken into the open yet, because it couldn't until the committee voted to, until the committee took their testimony and voted to release it. So,
but David Weiss knew exactly what was going on. David Weiss had already butted heads.
He knew what was coming,
right? And so he says, "I know what this guy has to say." He's been saying it to his supervisors for years.
Yeah, and did the whistleblowers testified before the plea deal went? I'm sorry, before the. Yes. Well, when was that? Because there was the original plea deal, which was basically like a diversion deal, right? Like he was just going to sign something and everything was going to go away, no convictions at all. Then I felt like then there was some disclosure. We learned more about this, and then there was like some pressure maybe from Weiss's office to increase the penalties a little bit, and then give him that sweetheart deal that we saw. Is that more or less?
Right. That was right. With us going in for their interviews. So again, those were happening kind of roughly the same time that trying to, again, box that up while the whistleblowers are being interviewed, those transcripts are being prepared. And so then, the way that it finally breaks out into the open, again, our first letter is sent in mid-April. It's not until June 20th.
And it's important to note that our first letter, it doesn't say anything about Hunter Biden. It doesn't say anything about the District of Delaware. It just says, it doesn't even say Gary Shapley's name, right? It says, I've got a client. He wants to make some protected disclosures about a big tax case. Will you help us? Right. That's all the first letter says. And yet, Abbe Lowell claimed in his lawsuit on behalf of Hunter to the IRS that was somehow a violation of something. Right. They didn't disclose anything about Hunter Biden. It was just like, hey, we have something we want to bring forward. Now, eventually, during that process, the committees, and people behind the scenes knew what it was going to be about because, we did a process situation, which was all appropriate.
And to that timeline again, so Gary's interviewed on May 26th. So that's almost a full month before it becomes public. It becomes public on June 22nd. So for a whole month, Democrats, Republicans on the Hill know what that testimony is, who are on the tax committee, right? But you could also, without revealing any of the substance there, say, this doesn't look good, guys, to DOJ. And so then it's on June 20th, the DOJ pops up out of nowhere and says, oh, actually, we have a plea deal. Hunter Biden's pled, everything's fine. Chris Clark goes in an interview and he said, after 5 years, he's asked, it seems really, all they came up with was these 2 misdemeanors. Like, you feel like that was a waste of their time. And boy, he just looks like the cat that caught the canary. He just keeps his face. Says, well, after 5 years, this is what we got. This is where we landed. And of course, he couldn't have been happier, right? But 2 days later,
if they had wrapped the testimony came out, it would have been, oh, that's old news.
Right.
Wild. Man. And that timing was just perfect. And then Hunter rejected the plea, and then, the whole thing started to open up a little bit more. So what a trip. What a trip that was. Okay. So let me share with you, this is some of the lies, right? These are the actual lies that Abbe Lowell is now sending in letters. So it's paragraph 25 of your complaint. It says, so Abbe Lowell is sending a bunch of letters off. These are the letters you referenced previously, sending these all over the government. Apparently, he sent one that says, you have it. It's not apparently. He sent one that says, yet another federal agent, Joseph Ziegler, illegally leaked information protected by the rules, right? So this is Hunter's lawyer sending letters encouraging the prosecution to agencies that his daddy runs. Saying more of Shapley says, there is no justification or cognizable legal protection for the whistleblower disclosures of confidential grand jury and tax information, and such disclosures are not protected by any exceptions. So his lawyer says that Shapley's unlawful disclosures are quite simply felonies, right? So he's like, that's aggressive arguing. Charge your clients with a crime to daddy's. These are going to the DOJ. Was he copying you guys on these? Like, did you guys know about this, or was this all just under?
We know somebody was giving them to the press because we got questions from the press about it. The New York Times called us right after their testimony came out, right after the House Tax Committee voted to release it, and they said, "Hey, we understand there's this letter where they're arguing to the Justice Department that your clients, violated the law. What do you have to say about that?"
Wild.
So we knew at that time that they were distributing those lies, outside of the normal process directly to the press, or at least somebody was.
Well, and guys, that puts you also in the crosshairs a little bit, right? Because you're the lawyers advising these clients, and they're looking at you guys saying, oh, maybe these guys, right? They're indicting lawyers all over the country for stuff that they were working on. So,
well, and imagine, put yourself in Gary. So you're already, you're suffering consequences at work. You've got other cases that you're working on, other big cases that all of a sudden, they have to have 14 levels of approval now, right? And they're shutting other projects you're working on down just so that, in your next performance appraisal, you're not going to have good metrics, right, to show what a great job you did. They're literally letting tax cheats go because they don't want to give Gary a win, right, as retaliation. They're denying him promotions that he's applying for. So you're going through all of that at work, trying to just keep your head above water and do your job in an environment where everybody's looking at you sideways and cutting you out of stuff. And then you find out, the president's son's lawyer is asking the Justice Department to prosecute me. It's intimidating. And we believe that was the purpose of it, was to intimidate and make sure that nobody else talked.
Yeah, and then you guys discovered all of this when?
So because these letters, references to different letters popped up in a couple of different stories. And so in September, the three committees investigating Ways and Means, Judiciary, and Oversight sent a letter to Chris Clark and Abbe Lowell and said, we hear that behind the scenes, you may be encouraging prosecution of the whistleblowers. We demand that you produce to us all of your communications with the Justice Department. So Abbe Lowell doesn't respond immediately. Then the committees also write to Merrick Garland, also asking for the same information. So Abbe Lowell is kind of boxed in here. So Lowell produces the information to Congress and says, yes, I'm giving all of it to you. And what's more, I'm happy to share it with you because we do think these guys did something wrong. And I'm releasing it to the public. If he just stopped and if he's giving it to Congress, perhaps there's an argument that you can make that it was privileged. That's not a judicial proceeding, but he didn't. He didn't stop with that. He released it also to the public.
Which shows he wasn't just trying to make his case to the committee, right? And this is what the complaint alleges, right? He wasn't just trying to make his case to the committee. He was intentionally republishing all of these false statements to a wider audience, to the public.
Right. And then I guess he's hoping for a media smear, or was this something that he was thinking would actually develop into charges? I mean, is he trying to create energy for charges, or do you think this is just a distraction type of a tactic, or what was the intention of this ultimately? Or like, did the DOJ bite on this?
Yeah, no, we have no indication that Gary has been seriously investigated at any point by even administratively.
I think it's important to know that after the plea deal fell apart, right? Concurrent with that. So one of the other kind of, things you may remember from the plea hearing is that the day before that, there was this whole scuffle over whether Chris Clark had pretended to be someone from Chairman Smith's legal team, right? And said,
I remember that.
4 documents down. And so again, there was a show cause order, saying, what happened here?
It was a legal assistant or something filed something or something went weird. Yeah.
Yeah. So Clark's team said, well, we weren't representing that we were there with the committee, but basically they wrote to the courtroom and said, Chairman Smith submitted this amicus brief, friend of the court brief, that included the IRS whistleblower transcripts. So Judge Noriega had all of that to consider when she had that plea hearing. And so Chris Clark was there arguing along with Abbe Lowell that it shouldn't even be entered into the record. And so both Judge Noriega said, you haven't pointed to anything specific that shows me that this is a violation of grand jury secrecy laws or anything else. And similarly, an assistant U.S. attorney in the Delaware office also told them directly, we're not aware of any illegal leaks or anything else like this that you're referring to. So he had all of that background before then just proceeding to file the lawsuit against the IRS.
Yeah, so you basically had a judge saying your allegations that all these things in the whistleblower's testimony violate grand jury and tax secrecy. No, she swatted away. She said that's not right. And I'm not taking them down. They're still on the court docket. They still are right now.
But so then he's suing the IRS to get compensation and then to also close the deal out, or is he asking the IRS to sanction your clients? Is that still a possibility? Or do something?
Well, I think I think that would just be a natural consequence, right? That's what we've argued in our motion to intervene. We said, look, we have a concrete interest. Both the government and Biden have a concrete interest. They're not parties. They shouldn't be able to have a voice in this process. And we said, what do you mean? If there's a judicial finding that they violated the rule, then their jobs, they can't continue being criminal tax agents at that point, right? I mean, their careers would be sort of officially over. So they do have skin in the game. They have a concrete interest. They have Article 3 standing. They should be able to intervene. And so that's what we've argued in the case, because so I think that's the likely. We would argue, of course, that the judicial finding is, if we're not allowed to intervene and there is some judicial finding against them in that case, we would of course argue, well, it's not fair because we didn't have a voice in the process, right? And they got all these facts wrong and they got this law wrong, et cetera, et cetera.
And where is that one filed?
To your question, that one's in the
DC
court. Yeah. To your point, though, he is asking for damages, right? Declaratory relief for Hunter Biden.
And there's a concern that maybe the IRS settles that, right, and actually just comes to some agreement.
Yeah, or just doesn't do or just doesn't really
lays down on
defending it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about damages. So I referenced this earlier, but the total amount of damages is $10 million apiece, right? So for Shapley and for Ziegler, and I hope they get, and you guys get every penny plus some. But walk us through maybe the personal side for these guys, right? They've been put through the ringer on this. So how are they doing? How are you guys doing? Talk about the journey that everybody's been on, because I know it has been a lot.
Yeah. I came to this, but I came to Empower from a position on what's called the Merit Systems Protection Board, which hears these kinds of employee appeals, appointed by President Biden as the Republican on that board. So the whistleblower laws we knew very well. And so right from the outset, I remember Gary looking me in the eye and asking, am I going to be screwed when we do this? Right. And saying, no, there are whistleblower laws in place that are to protect whistleblowers. There's going to be a lot of public scrutiny on this. We are meticulously following every one of the legal procedures here. So, they might make your life a little miserable, but there should not be kind of big long-term consequences. And I've had to eat my words some because, again, Gary's been passed over for several promotions, and the vindication process is a really slow one. You have to go to the Office of Special Counsel, another agency that I served at previously. You have to file your complaint. They have to go through this investigation. One of the biggest kind of blows to them was being removed from the Hunter Biden tax case altogether.
Yeah.
But the law doesn't necessarily, it's not clear whether that would be considered as a personnel action or not, because it's one of several cases that you have, even though, Joe Ziegler is the one that first opened this case for years and years, right? He spent so much time investigating this. Clearly there was a lot to investigate, as anyone who has seen, the filings in the California case will see, right?
Yeah.
So having gone through all of that, right, to take them off the case was significant. But so it has been very hard for them, and especially to see their name dragged through the mud. So one of the things we haven't talked about is that Mitch Langberg is the defamation attorney. He is a very, very high profile defamation attorney. He represented Steve Wynn in a lawsuit against Girls Gone Wild, where a jury awarded $40 million. The judge cut it down to $20 million. So again, he's just a crack defamation attorney. But so it's meant a lot to them that he was willing to take this case. It's really interesting that he has said, just not knowing much about it before ever engaging on the facts and talking to us. If you're just someone that kind of consumes the media, all you get is the impression these guys did violate the law. And so going into the facts for him was really an eye-opening experience to say, wow, you guys really tried to do the right thing, and this is where you ended up. So they very much are hopeful that they'll be able to vindicate their name, regardless of the ultimate outcome of the defamation suit.
Yeah.
For people to understand, right? Even if they say, well, you didn't violate the law, whatever the ultimate standards are to prove defamation. But, again, if they can explain that to the public and have the public understand, that's a significant development.
Yeah, but there's multiple.
And on damages,
please.
I was just going to say, on damages, you should also understand that your audience should understand, because they were being accused of a crime, that's what's called per se defamation.
Okay.
If you're accused of a crime or something else that makes it, that's completely incompatible with your profession, right? Which obviously committing a crime would be for a criminal investigator.
Yeah.
That's per se defamation. And what that means is that you actually don't have to prove. You don't have to prove, exact damages at trial. The damages are presumed. It's presumed that if you're accused of a crime, that's going to be damaging to you, which obviously it would be, as I said, for any criminal investigator to be accused of a crime.
Yeah, and they've got multiple different you guys are at multiple different avenues that are happening right now, right? You're basically trying to intervene in the IRS case so that you can represent these guys there. You've got this complaint for defamation, right, against one of the key actors who's trying to incriminate your clients essentially and prosecute them. But then the real big one, and so ultimately is you're trying to essentially reinstate Shapley and Ziegler.
Yeah, we have a complaint. Yeah, we have a complaint with the Office of Special Counsel.
Okay.
It's not the special counsel people are most familiar with. It's an independent agency that investigates whistleblower protection. That's badly named and needs to be renamed. But anyway, we have a complaint with the Office of Special Counsel where we allege that many things that complaint is public as well. But I mean, he was passed over for a promotion into the job that he was absolutely perfect for. I mean, he would be running what's called the J5, which is an international collection of friendly tax agencies, right? It's what he does all the time. It's a group
he helped stand it up himself. So he was the obvious.
Right, he created it.
Right.
Right. And it's how he's able to work these international tax cases and bring people to justice for trying to hide their money overseas, right? It's friendly tax jurisdictions working together to catch tax cheats, right? And so he was, even before any of this became public, they had already, but after Weiss had already found out he was blowing the whistle internally, and had already had communications with his supervisors, they then passed him over for that promotion. So that was our first complaint to OSC, and we had been supplementing that, as other things happen, and many, many other things have happened. I won't bore you with all the details, but essentially, as I said before, like cases he's working on have been shut down, like for no logical reason, just sort of to deny him a win,
Yeah.
His relationship with his supervisors has completely changed. I think at one point he had not had a direct phone call with his, or in-person meeting with his direct supervisor for months. Like they were just, holding him at arm's length and only sending him an email like once every 2 weeks.
Yeah. So are they still employed? Like, are they still officially connected with but
They're still working cases.
Yeah.
They're still working cases.
Yeah.
So again, for Gary,
it's just 10 times harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're not, again, if you're on a track, if you're on a trajectory to become like a leader in the agency, right? You usually go from being a supervisory special agent. He'd been an acting assistant special agent in charge in the past, right? There's a career progression they are expected to move up for. But if suddenly every promotion opportunity is closed to him, right, that effectively kind of ends his career. He can continue on, like he would have to be demoted after a while if they say like, oh, you're not rising, you're not a leader, right? You continue on as like a rank and file. But again, he was a rising leader in the agency.
Right.
That's really stopped now. So one other element I want to make sure that everybody watching understands is this whistleblower retaliation complaint. We have the whistleblower expertise at Empower that we were able just to do that. And we provide everybody that we work with provide pro bono legal services, right? We're not charging any of the people that we represent. Same with our experience in going to Congress. This defamation lawsuit was really kind of out of our wheelhouse. And so that's why Mitch Langberg is so key. But again, a good defamation lawyer like that, like we could have just filed something on our own. Again, we don't know the area of the law. It's a very nuanced area of law. And so again, a good defamation lawyer is really expensive. So that's what defendwhistleblowers.com is for. Not just this case, but again, in general, the idea that as you see whistleblowers get smeared, next week, like we mentioned, I'll be testifying alongside Marcus Allen, and he made so many statements about him claiming he was a threat to national security. And so the idea behind this new fund is that defamation suits can be a way to push back, to fight back, so that people, you can't just lie about someone with impunity. For so long, the best thing the law had to offer was corrective action for someone. But what about consequences for the perpetrator, right? That's what's been lacking. And that's what we hope this defamation fund will be able to accomplish. But again, it's incredibly expensive. So that's what we
and that is the go-to that any retaliator. I mean, that's what whistleblowers always face. They get jammed up at work, and then the other thing they face is they get publicly smeared, right? And it's happened to our FBI whistleblower clients as well. We had to push back on this article in the Cleveland Plain Dealer a couple of months ago. That just blatantly accused our clients of like being at January 6th and participating in the violence, which is just completely, absolutely false. They worked at the FBI. They weren't there. It was just but they're just making up talking points, right? Just smearing these guys. And so it's something that if we have the ability to bring on people with the resources to help us, both get corrections and, threaten lawsuits and fight to make sure that, people don't think they can just lie about whistleblowers and get away with it.
Yeah. And I think the work that you're doing is so important. And I have learned a lot even today, just understanding the mechanics in order to get them to the point where they can blow the whistle. It's really a lot. So we're grateful for you guys. Now, do you have a little bit more time? I wanted to jump into the other letter for a little bit, if we can jump into that, because I think we have a good segue into this, because Tristan, you're testifying in front of the Weaponization Committee.
Yeah, so Jim Jordan's chair of both the Judiciary Committee and then the subcommittee that is the Weaponization Select Committee. Yeah,
and tell us a little bit about this. So this involves another one of your clients. His name is Marcus Allen. He's an FBI staff operations specialist. And the reason I wanted to dig into this one is because, and let's pull this up on the screen here, is because when I was reading through it, the first thing that stood out to me was this guy's name, because we've been talking about this guy on the show this recent week, which is this guy right here, Jeffrey Veltri. And we read an article from him, I think earlier this week, that he had to scrub. So Jeffrey Veltri is now the special agent in charge of the Miami field office. Trump was nearly assassinated on the golf course there in West Palm Beach, I believe it was. And this guy came out and was addressing the media, answering questions from the media. Well, there's another article from some Washington Times, that's right, that said that he had been found with a bunch of nasty Facebook posts and that he had to scrub his social media before he got that promotion. Of course, those posts were very anti-Trump. And so walk us through what's going on here. So this guy, Marcus Allen, is a client of yours, and you're testifying on September 25th, coming up very soon.
Yeah. So I think it's helpful to have some background here first before we turn to Veltri. But a year ago, I testified in front of weaponization alongside Marcus Allen and then another person we were representing, Steve Friend, another former FBI agent, and then Garrett O'Boyle, who we're also now representing. So all three of the people there we are representing or have represented at various times. That hearing, was the culmination of them having, they had all blown the whistle to Congress. They'd all been retaliated against. And the FBI had, essentially the eve of the hearing for Steve Friend. I mean, literally it was the day before the hearing. The FBI had sent a letter to Congress after stiff arming them for months saying, we can't provide information about security clearance adjudications. We're not at liberty to disclose that. The process isn't complete. Well, then all that we knew at the time publicly was they finished the process. They sent a letter that again, smeared these guys. They sent that to Congress. The letter immediately got linked to the Washington Post. We don't know if that was from the Hill, if it was from the FBI. But so it's all out there that these guys, did these horrible things allegedly, right? And so that hearing starts with the ranking member saying, you've invited 3 threats to our national security here into this hearing room. It was just ludicrous, right?
Wild.
I come in, I sit down next to Marcus. He sets his crucifix on the table there. He's such a religious individual, right? These guys are all just so by the book, straightforward guys. And so what's remarkable is now a year later, what we didn't know at the time was that a number of people within the FBI at each stage of this wrongful action by the FBI Security Division were objecting to it, and they were being retaliated against. And so now we represent several of the people from within the FBI Security Division. So we've pulled back the curtain, and now we can see everything that was happening behind the scenes. And so this letter was an attempt to kind of document for the committee for next week so they can see. For Marcus, it's some real vindication. Again, before he was told he's a threat to national security, he was an intelligence analyst for the Marines. He received commendations. Even as an intel analyst, he was exposed to live enemy fire on 2 different instances when he was deployed, right? He loves America. And so for him, it was so hurtful to be told that he's, that he is a, what's the phrase?
Disloyal.
Yeah, his allegiance in question. That's right.
Guy who literally got shot at for this country was called disloyal with no evidence.
So, to go back with the security clearance now being reinstated, so back after us fighting for all this time, his clearance was reinstated a few months ago. But after that, again, dominoes started to fall. We learned, in fact, that the adjudicator who was recommending his reinstatement had been impressed with our submission on his behalf, right? Saying these guys are making the right arguments, and as I'm looking at the evidence, he should not have been retaliated against. We're representing her because she was retaliated against for saying that about Marcus. So
unreal.
So the letter goes into Marcus, it goes into Garrett, but again, that's some of the background. And so for Jeffrey Veltri to pop up, on America's televisions talking about this, there's an immense amount of information out there that we already had about him over the course of these last many months because
before he was the SAC down there in Florida, he was in the leadership of the security division at the FBI, which is the subdivision of the FBI that handles the security clearance investigations.
Right.
And that was directly involved in overseeing the people who were, who were objecting to what the wrong things that were being done to Marcus and Garrett.
And so, what was the original retaliation?
So he's as a staff operations specialist, that's like an intel analyst for the FBI. He's down in the Charlotte field office. He's assigned to their Joint Terrorism Task Force. And down there, his job is to help provide situational awareness of things that are going on. Well, they're doing a bunch of prosecutions of J6 defendants, right?
Yeah.
And so he's sending, along the way, he's sending information about those. Say, hey, there's this information out there. There's this information out there. Some people are arguing that X, Y, and Z. Well, if you recall in 2021, one of the big kind of mysteries is the wrong word, but not less than a month after January 6th, Director Chris Wray goes to the Senate. It was Judiciary Committee, right? It was Jason and I's former committee. And there he is asked by Senator Amy Klobuchar, she says, don't you wish you had some informants there on January 6th? Wouldn't that just have been so helpful? And he says, Ollie, yeah, operational information is good wherever we get it. Like, he really sidesteps the question. And so then in the summer of 2021, Reuters comes out with this article saying, is it possible that they had some people there? And then in September of 2021, there's this blockbuster Sunday front page New York Times article that says the FBI had at least one, if possibly two informants. Now we know that there were something like 30, right? But at the time, that was big news. There were two informants there. So Marcus put in an email back to his coworkers on the JTTF and his supervisors saying, given that Director Wray, I mean, this wasn't what he wasn't as explicit about this. I'll say in a minute what he said specifically. But the background was he's aware of Director Wray's testimony. Now it's coming out that there were undercover, that there were informants there on J6. So his email says there's a good possibility that the DC elements of our organization are not being fully forthcoming about the events of that day.
This is Marcus who sends this.
Marcus, he sends that. And that is the one email, that is the key thing that everything got him into all the trouble all throughout everything as supervisors. And, you know, again, I get that, like, they don't love people questioning the director of the FBI. That's fine, right? And I get that January 6th is a very charged topic for a lot of people, and it certainly was in the FBI, as we outlined in our letter. But the whistleblower law that's been around long before January 6th says you're allowed to make disclosures, and someone lying to Congress is the sort of thing, or making disclosures of potential wrongdoing, that you can be protected in sharing. And so all of the information, all of the subsequent action that happened to Marcus, as the agency was like, well, but don't forget he did this. It all hinged on this one thing that was a protected disclosure, as you would call it under the law. And so they can't take action against him for that.
So he got red flagged for a J6 opinion, basically. And then did the same thing happen to him, right? He's also getting bumped out of meetings, and
it was worse. He got suspended without pay.
Yeah, that's right. And I would just point out there, again, not that it matters on the spectrum of these things. Again, it wasn't even necessarily an opinion about J6. It was an opinion about the testimony that Chris Wray gave in front of Congress, which again has significant repercussions, right?
Right.
So
thanks for the clarity on that. That's a small nuance, right? So that's very important, right? He's saying that there is a problem with what our leadership is reporting through the official means of communications to Congress in an official body, right? It's not like they're having a conversation over beers.
And it's important to know that he knew that not only because of the New York Times article, when everybody else, would have known that and could have put two and two together themselves, but he knew it because he was supporting cases there in the Charlotte field office where they did personally that they were working on cases where they had, people he was working with were running informants that were there. And he knew that. So he would have known when he first saw Wray give the testimony, right, that it wasn't completely candid and complete.
Yeah. And so then he gets penalized. Eventually you guys, connect, and now you're learning a lot more about the same pattern of bias, right? He expresses this one opinion. Suddenly he gets blacklisted or red flagged. But
And the background behind that, right, and this is what we try to lay out in our letter, is how this came about. And so Veltri is just one kind of cog in the FBI machine.
Yes.
But Deputy Director Paul Abbate starts as the deputy in February of 21, so the month after January 6th. That very same month, and this is in an affidavit we provided to the Inspector General a year ago from a different whistleblower, but that very same month, Abbate comes in and says, on a call with all of the FBI management, every field officer, special agent in charge, for most of them, they'd have their ASACs in there, assistant special agent in charge. There's headquarters folks in there. He says on there, I'm hearing that a lot of people are questioning the FBI's response to this. And I'm here to tell you, if you don't like how we handled January 6th or our investigations, our response to that, you shouldn't be working the FBI.
Yeah.
If you want to have, if people have questions, have them come to me. And so, as our affidavits there says, from that whistleblower, he says he's never seen a direct threat like that any other time out of hundreds of director video conferences. It was feeling and personal, communicating clearly there'd be consequences for knowing the question's direction. And so that whole year, kind of the chain of FBI leadership, and there's a lot of turnover in these high-level FBI positions, but the people that come into place, you just end up with this real alignment that all of them share this view that if you don't toe this very specific line on how the FBI should have responded to January 6th, including you can't question, right, whether the FBI should have been more aggressive in response to riots across the United States in the summer of 2020, right? That's one of the things they say, no, you can't question how we responded to this. And so that's what puts people on the flag for this kind of security clearance action.
Right. And then
so Paul Abbate's number 2 at the FBI. I mean, the deputy director of the FBI, much more so even than the director. And so you have the guy who runs the place, who can who can overrule normal personnel procedures and just put someone in a job if he wants them there, or can take them out of a job if he wants to, right? You have that person sending the signal to all the people below him, dissent on this issue will not be tolerated.
Right, and aggressively. I mean, you guys wrote it in here. You say that Abbate, I always call him Abbate on the show. I don't know why, but I like Abbate. But Abbate, if
I did
that's
it first
his name.
too, but it's Abbate.
It's Abbate. All right.
So
Abbate. Abate said he told, like, you can just imagine this, okay? He told a group of all senior FBI officials, all the second in command, right? The whole group, everybody get together. Anyone who questioned the FBI's response or our decisions regarding it did not belong in the FBI and should find a different job, right? Says Director Abbate also told the assembled leadership that if they had an employee who did not agree with the FBI's response to J6, they could have that employee call him directly and he would set them straight. It's like, whoa, man. And I'm in favor of, leaders of companies, and you got to set the tone and set the mood and all that stuff. But
they set a tone, all right.
They set a tone, and part of their job is to kind of investigate what was happening on January 6th. And we don't have an official number on how many undercover informants were there, but we covered the Proud Boy trial at length here. And in there, the defense team, they said, it never got admitted, but they said that they identified like 50 people, I think was the actual term they used, 50. And a big portion of those were HSI people and other people who were not a part of the FBI, but other agencies. And so I think it's perfectly reasonable to have questions about that. And of course, the FBI doesn't want you to even talk about it, not even come up with an alternative explanation for any of this. So,
yeah. So as you scroll down in the letter, you see kind of as things move forward again that year, it just you end up with this series of folks who have these similar views on things. And Abate is one who, not Abate, Jeff Veltri is one who in particular kind of right from the jump has this view that, like, if you don't view things the way he does, again, you're not worthy to work in the FBI, right there in that paragraph right there.
Yeah.
Veltri's and Perkins' perspectives were that if an FBI employee fit a certain profile as a political conservative, right above there, they were viewed as a security concern and unworthy to work at the FBI, which again is essentially a statement of what Abate had said, right? Veltri also said openly, well, you might have First Amendment rights, but you don't have a right to a security clearance. And so again, they're sending the message all throughout. As you say, they're setting the tone. So your rank and file people, just a few weeks ago, Director Wray testified before the Judiciary Committee that I'll be in front of. And he was asked about the Trump questionnaire that's come up, right? Something that back in June, I went on Tucker Carlson. We talked about this. And part of what he said in there, it's further down. But
I did remember that. The Trump questionnaire.
Yeah, but he was asked there about that questionnaire, and he basically said, well, it was a low-level employee who's gone from the agency already, and it wasn't a standard form or anything else like that. Right there below that paragraph next. Testified that they were asked by an outside contractor, but the point that I wanted to make for that thing higher up above is that this security division that conducts these investigations, although you've got you've got Chris Wray, you've got Paul Abate, you've got Jennifer Lee Moore, you've got then another assistant director, which changed. For a lot of it was a guy named Doug Beidler. Then you've got Jeff Veltri. Then as you get down to like the line level folks, they are mostly just contractors, or they're people who left the FBI and were coming back. They call it a reemployed annuitant, right? You have your pension, you come back to do this other kind of functionary job. And it was that process there that led to sorry, I've got a kid knocking on the door. So, Jason, why don't you pick up from right there?
Well, so I just found that section here about the questionnaire. So let me pull that back up, because this was what we were talking about.
This was something we learned. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the questionnaire, right? This Trump questionnaire. So it's almost like there's like this form that they're sending out or something, or just asking people questions. But they were even asking about medical decisions and whether they got jabs, like whether they took the jab, and the evidence clearly. So if you took the jab, you were on one list. If you didn't, you're on another list or something.
Yeah, let me explain the background of that for you. So what happened was we obtained, we were representing another client who's not been public at all. And one of the things that we do when a client has their security clearance revoked is, then only after it's revoked, you then get to ask the FBI, hey, give us the file, right? Give us the security file. We want to be able to see all the evidence, much like a criminal defendant, right? In a case, like show us what you got, right? And so after they've revoked it, you get to see what they got. So we got the file and we found what people call the Trump questionnaire is really just it's the interview outline that was prepared by the investigators. So it was used in questioning witnesses who knew our client. Again, not Marcus Allen, this is a different client. But they went to the coworkers and they asked the coworkers, here's the outline, here's the questions I'm going to ask. And then it had written underneath it, what the answers were. And it had these really inappropriate questions that were right there when we were reviewing the documents.
And it started with before they even jumped in, one of the first questions was, have you ever socialized with this individual? I mean, they're right at the outset, they're saying, first of all, you're required to answer all these questions correctly. Your own security clearance could be in jeopardy if you answer any of them incorrectly. Then they ask if they've ever socialized with them. So they have completely set the tone here, right? For like, all right, I got to tell everything about this person. And that's
basically they're pressuring coworkers to rat on their coworkers, right?
Like, right. And then to isolate, right? Like, then don't ever talk to that person again because you're gonna get asked about it if it comes up.
You don't tell me the truth. If you don't answer these questions.
Yeah, did they have hesitancy about the vaccine? Like there's not a law that was broken, right? The idea of these categories are just outrageous for them to even be asking about them.
Wild.
Right. So we found those. So then the question is obviously like, well, how widespread is this, right? So we send it to the inspector. Tristan went on Tucker and talked about it, got a lot of attention. And then, Ray gets asked about it and he says, well, he sort of passes it off as like a one-off. Well, we know from our other whistleblower clients now, it absolutely wasn't a one-off. They may not have written it down and pre-typed it every time like that. But what we've learned is, and what the letter that you've been showing people goes through in great detail is, there was a tone set by the leadership in the security division that these are the issues they cared about. These are the questions they were asking in the meetings when they're going over and they're overruling their subordinates, when their subordinates are saying, there's not really a security risk here. And it's like, they're asking questions like, well, is he vaxxed? Is he a Trump guy? Right. So they might not have written that down or given them a direct instruction to say, you will ask everyone these questions, but the people who were doing the investigations knew how to please their bosses, right? That's why those people wrote down those questions, is because they knew that if they could find something on those two issues in particular, that was something that their bosses were looking for.
Well, and the flip side of that, right? And I don't know if you want to control F for Kelly cart in the document, right? This is one of the things that when we first heard this from Whistleblower was like, are you kidding me? But it turns out that it was actually two interviewers who were conducting these interviews involving our clients. They were there for the interview of our client, again, not Marcus Allen, the other one, and doing so. They were the ones that used this outline. But what we were told is they were so fearful of being fired by the leadership of the security division, they talked about something called the Kelly cart all the time, which was a reference to someone else in their unit who pushed back against a woman named Dina Perkins. She and Jeffrey Veltri were thick as thieves and were the ones that were always making these comments about, well, I don't know, these religious views they have, or, I don't know if they didn't get the vaccine or whatever, right? So they pushed back against her. And so she's walked out of the building. She's terminated. Meanwhile, someone shows up. They'd all been here in this unit working together. Some unknown person just comes and starts putting into a cart all of her personal belongings. They were like, what's happening? What happened to Kelly over here? Well, the Kelly cart came for her. And so after that, they talked about this all the time. They were all afraid of that. So when Ray says, this was a one-off from just a contractor and they're gone. And by the way, it's not like they're gone because the FBI took action against them. They're just gone because their contract was up. In fact, those employees were reportedly terrified of crossing. So it wasn't just they were just seeking to please. They were afraid that they were going to be harmed, that there would be consequences if they didn't go after these kinds of things, following the tone set by their bosses.
And this letter just has a pattern of this, right? So when you're testifying about this to Congress, what is Congress? What's the purpose of this? Are they trying to identify this pattern? What are they going to do with this? What are they hoping to achieve by showing this clear pattern of basically anti-Trump, anti-conservative behavior? I mean, even here, you were talking about this Catholic stuff, right? Saying that here, the implication is that Veltri believed that Mr. Allen's Christian beliefs as a devout Catholic were a reason to revoke his access to classified information.
Right. So when they interviewed Marcus Allen and they said, "Why'd you send that email?" Right, that horrid email, which was just again the protected disclosure, and he said, "Well, I felt like I had a moral obligation to do so. The Holy Spirit compelled me to do so." Again, he's a very religious individual, and so then they're like laughing about that. Veltri told people that he thought Marcus Allen was crazy because he didn't suggest a specifically secular or moral or ethical reason. It was that he felt that there was like a religious component that he needed to follow his conscience. So again, these were the sort of things that are outrageous in here. But I think there's two things that we really hope. Well, actually, we'll say there's three things for Congress. First of all, I will say that as a former congressional investigator, it can be very difficult. For one, you can't get specific personnel actions, right? Congress can't reinstate a whistleblower. I wished so badly that I could when I worked on the Hill, right? We worked on whistleblower policy. We would amend the law to try and strengthen these protections. But ultimately, it's these other agencies that I moved into after Congress, the Office of Special Counsel and the Merit Systems Protection Board. They're the only ones that have that kind of personnel authority. So Congress doesn't have the authority to do that. They could like cut funding or something. There's a lot of things they could do. And I know a lot of people have make fun of strongly worded letters, right? But there is an element that like they can't reinstate an employee. And so I think that's important to know for this. But what they can do is publicize the circumstances. And one of the things this letter walks through is the fact that as these guys are being retaliated against, Congress was asking about that. Now, it turns out that what that did, in fact, was cause these individuals to be somewhat retaliated against more, maybe, and certainly for the FBI to try harder to cover its tracks. But I don't think that means that Congress shouldn't have been inquiring, right? So they were doing their job of oversight, and it just turns out the FBI was continually fighting. So laying the record of that out, I think, helps to build support for what we think ought to be statutory changes, right? Jason and I have worked on these laws for many years. When Senator Grassley was about to become the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I wrote a long memo to Jason, who was my manager at the time, saying why this was the time to try and get FBI protections strengthened. It turned out that all we were able to get in the next Congress was some very limited protections, and actually have that law framed here on my wall from 2016.
Amazing.
But there's still a lot of changes that need to happen, and so that's a big part of what we want to be able to explain in this hearing. We've been talking about those for a long time, and everyone says, yeah, statutory gets boring quickly, right? But now reading through something like this, I think really helps to illustrate, okay, you've got to have these kinds of protections. The FBI is the only federal law enforcement agency that doesn't have the same whistleblower protections as all the other ones. Secret Service, ATF, DEA, U.S. Marshals, they've all got the same whistleblower protections except for the FBI.
I did not know that. And what distinguishes the two, or what's the difference? They're just
one doesn't put their pants on one leg at a time, apparently. I mean, there's no rational reason for it. But in 1978, when they passed these laws, the FBI had immense clout still. It was a few years after J. Edgar Hoover's passing. And the FBI at the last minute, it wasn't originally that way in the original bill, but on the floor of the House, the FBI got someone to propose an amendment. They got it passing. Well, there's these general security concerns. And so the FBI is not even, the nepotism laws don't even apply to the FBI. Like half of the prohibited personnel practices don't apply. And so they are excluded from that. And we've
wild. I did not know that. We make fun of them for the FISA courts and how they get access to all of our private information and stuff like that without, like, in other words, there's exceptions for the FBI. The rules don't apply to them like they apply to everybody else. So you're saying that they have a little bit more ability to tamper down some of the whistleblowers from arising than maybe other agencies do.
Absolutely.
On paper, there's
a whole separate section of the law that just applies to the FBI, right? Because they were exempted from the part that applies to everybody else. And so it's just written differently. And people, it's weak in many, many ways. It's weak in terms of they can't make disclosures to the same, to the same places. They have to only go to certain people.
And let me
it's weak in terms of the protections the procedural protections as to whether they can ever get someone out to ever look at it and correct a miscarriage of justice. Go ahead, Tristan.
I was just going to add on that specific who they can make disclosures to. One of the things that's come up, right, is some whistleblowers that we're representing from the Air Marshal's service about Tulsi Gabbard, right? It's a perfect example of where that whistleblowers from most federal law enforcement agencies can go to the media, and the Whistleblower Protection Act doesn't limit who your protected disclosures can be to. If they meet the protected criteria, the media can be protected recipients. And a colleague of ours,
the FBI.
Yes, except the FBI. So they cannot. That's one of the exceptions where they cannot go to the media, even if there's something blatantly, clearly wrong or illegal or unconstitutional that the FBI is doing.
What an interesting environment. And I'm curious if you can share any insight or any thoughts on the status of whistleblowers in America. Is this something that, we're seeing an increase of? Are we seeing more courage? Are people freaked out about this? I mean, you guys are busy. You're doing a lot of work. Obviously, you've got a lot of different things, rods in the fire. But the country's changing pretty dramatically, right? The DOJ is not the same DOJ it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We're seeing, Trump's being prosecuted now in multiple jurisdictions. Like all the old precedent has now been shattered in many ways. So I'm kind of curious what the state of whistleblowers is. Are more people seeing things and speaking out? Are the people that you're talking to, are they facing, new pressures? What's the game field kind of looking like from your perspective?
Yeah, I would say that
from my point of view. Go ahead.
No,
from my point of view, I think the people they're sort of waiting to see how a lot of these controversies come out.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've specifically heard that, like in the case of our IRS whistleblowers, right? Secrecy is kind of a one-way ratchet, right? And it just sort of eats up everything around it. And, even though the law specifically says, yeah, you can go to Congress, you can go to the tax committees, they see what has happened and what what happens to people and when there's negative consequences. So, there's all this litigation going on. I think people, we know specifically we've been told, like, there are people who are thinking of blowing the whistle on things, but they're not going to do it until they see how this litigation comes out. Right. So I think everybody's, a lot of people who might want to are kind of in a holding pattern. Right. Yeah. And so let's see how this works. And then on the FBI side, it's not just making the FBI under the same whistleblower protections as everybody else. It needs to also just look at the security clearance process, because this is a loophole that you can drive a truck through to retaliate against the whistleblower, and nobody's gonna stop you. Everybody's gonna defer to, it must be a security risk, right? And we saw how that played out last year. And now we know, after a year more of investigation and more whistleblowers, that was bunk. These guys weren't legitimate security concerns. They were just whistleblowers who, got on the wrong side of people who could retaliate against them.
Yeah, and I imagine there's always been whistleblowers, right, in history, and our government has always tried to protect itself against people who are exposing them. But it feels like we're in a new era right now where you've got a bunch of J6ers sitting in custody. You've got, the Proud Boys in prison for 20 years, and Trump's being prosecuted. We see Abbe, Lowell, right? You start to see these relationships now that are very concerning, very troubling, when he's telling his client's daddy to prosecute people that his son doesn't like. And it's not good, right? So I'm really grateful that we have guys like you who are standing firm and representing these heroes. And we've called Shapley and Ziegler, heroes here many times, and they couldn't do it without you. So we're grateful for that. Now, I want to also ask about how people can support you, because it's a question that we get here a lot, right? A lot of people are asking, what do I do about all this, right? All this corruption is on display. You've got 22 pages in just this one letter that you're going to be talking about next week. And so it's like never ending. But what can people do, right? I know you said a lot of this is pro bono. A lot of this is just you guys putting your blood, sweat, and tears into. But I want to make sure people can follow you, people can support you, people can donate to your Give, Send, Go. And as a reminder, we have done that here. So if you're watching us, my friends, and you're able to support, we'd encourage you to do that. The website is defendwhistleblowers.com, and it'll take you over here to this Give, Send, Go. And if you can make a contribution, we would really encourage you to do that. If you can't, we made a one on behalf of the fam, the Watchers fam here. So we dropped one here last night, and want to, put our money where our mouth is, put our skin in the game and support these guys. So if you can do that, please do that. That's over at defendwhistleblowers.com. But what are you guys, what do you need? What can we do to support you?
Well, first off, thank you so much for your generosity, and it's awesome.
Absolutely.
What a
thank you guys, man. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. The real, I think, certainly, obviously, financial help is significant, right? Particularly because of that defamation case, and because that's going to be so expensive. So that's something that we are going to be kind of working to try and raise for quite some time. I will say beyond that, it's I just, as people follow along, obviously I'm aware that like 22 pages is not something people usually want to read, right? And so it's hard because, again, we get the same things. Like, we're accused of writing strongly worded letters, and it's like, what other tool do you want me to use, right? Like,
Yeah.
a shovel's not going to do anything to help these whistleblowers. And
Yeah.
so, but Marcus Allen's clearance was reinstated because of the power of the information that was dug up. And so I think people just paying attention and learning this kind of stuff, is significant. Being knowledgeable, that's what the founding fathers knew was necessary for our republic to continue, right? 3 days ago was Constitution Day, right? And that as Benjamin Franklin's walking out of the center there and is asked, "What do we have, a republic?" Or and he said, "Republic if you can keep it." Yeah. And being informed is such an important part of that. So even if you can't donate financially, just staying up with this kind of information, I think is significant, because it is really easy to toss your hands up and say,
totally.
How just to give up. I moved out of DC when I got confirmed to the MSPB. I moved to Charleston, West Virginia, because I was like, I've dug up so many scandals. I want to go help build some stuff, right? Like, I want to try and help make our public schools better and make X, Y, and Z better. But but throwing your hands up, I think, and just ignoring things is a mistake. Which obviously anybody who's tuning into you, which we've enjoyed doing for some time, and they are paying attention to long letters. But I hope people will continue that.
Yeah, and I would say that in addition to the Give, Send, Go campaign, I mean, people should know that just if you can't give, share it with someone who maybe can, right? Help it. If it can go viral, we can, if we can get the public to help fund this and to build a war chest to go after people who smear whistleblowers, then maybe people will think twice about doing it, and then the next person will feel a little more comfortable coming forward, knowing that there's somebody who's going to stand up for them. And people should know none of that money that goes to that site goes to our salaries or anything. That is strictly for litigation costs to explore, defamation claims against anybody who smears one of our clients, now or in the future. So that's what that's for. And hopefully, we want that to be a deterrent.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys. And this is something we talk a lot about. Sometimes we'll rip on the letters, not from you guys, but from Congress, like letter after letter after letter. But that is just the nature of this stuff. And I think there's a lot of power in this. There's a lot of power in the letters. It's no different than the Federalist Papers or the Anti-Federalist Papers. These are a little bit more transactional, but you're illustrating the corruption for all of us to see. And I couldn't agree more. I think that a big opponent that we face is just the energy monster that's going to suck all the energy and life out of our side by just, it's a really deflating thing to constantly come up against corruption and corruption and corruption. And the people who are supposed to be the keepers of justice are responsible for it. And you're like, this is just maddening. And I think a lot of that is by design, to try to disengage people, to disenfranchise people so that people will just go pay attention to sports or Hollywood or whatever, right? That's all fine in certain doses, but let's hold our government accountable. Let's stay engaged. Let's stay civically involved and continue to monitor this stuff. And the amount of digging you guys have done has been just really, really impressive and admirable. And the battle that you're fighting is just awesome. So we're super grateful to have you guys. And I also want to support your X account. So my friends, make sure you're also following them over on X so that you can stay engaged, right? So we just sent in the Dono link over to their Give, Send, Go. Would love it if you could make a contribution, no matter how big or small, because it's going to a good cause, and that they are at the forefront of this stuff. And so, Jason Foster, you're over on X. Is that the best place to follow you?
Yeah, that's the best place. And our website is empoweroversight.org. You can just go there and it'll redirect to our website. Empower Oversight. And you can follow Jason Foster at JSNFOSTR. Links are in the description. And then Tristan, you are next week, you're going to DC to testify. What's coming up there? That's the Marcus Allen stuff. What time is that happening?
Yeah, Wednesday at 10 a.m., Weaponization Committee. It'll be me, Marcus Allen, and this time we'll have the Inspector General to be able to, so that when we are saying, well, he made protected whistleblower disclosures, and everyone's last time jumping on him and attacking him for that, the Inspector General can say, yes, he made protected whistleblower disclosures. So it'll be a great hearing. Amazing. Well, we're looking forward to it. We may cover it. It's going to be Wednesday, you said? Is that? Yeah, Wednesday morning Eastern. Yeah, so. Wednesday. Cool. Well, all right, my friends. So everybody, make sure you're going and supporting them at the Give, Send, Go. We just linked it over there. Defendwhistlblowers.com will also take you right over there. Make sure you're following these two guys,
because they're doing very important work. We had a couple comments, just want to share with you guys while you're here. Some people sent in some donos. And yeah, this one from Voice of the People says, I remember listening to that whole 6-hour committee hearing with the whistleblowers. The fact that the Biden family's not in prison from that info is pretty amazing. So that was a comment from Voice of the People.
Jack Mack mentioned in there, the FBI can't go to the media, but Comey admits he deliberately leaked info to the media as the FBI director. And the answer is yes. And when the Inspector General's office was very unhappy about that, sent that over, right? Who's going to hold him accountable? Nobody. He's out of the government, right? But that's a perfect
Same thing with McCabe. The Inspector General referred McCabe, who was the deputy director at the time, for leaking and lying to the Inspector General about it. And they declined, the Justice Department declined prosecution.
It's a double standard. It's pretty sick. So thank you for that. That was a great question. Thanks for catching that one from Jack Mack. Jennifer sent this one, says, great guest, Robert. Thank you, brave gentlemen, for your time, strength, hard work, and perseverance. We appreciate all of you. And let's see, we saw another one. Hello, everyone. And yeah, there's a lot of good comments in the chat here. Let me pull this up. Let me see here. Great guest, having that information. Yeah, you guys rock. Some great comments.
Keep seeing
from everybody.
Cougar tracks from my alma mater like every 20 minutes popping up here on the side.
That's funny. Okay. Well, great, guys. So thank you so much for being here. We'd love to have you back. Tristan, have a great time testifying.
Thank you.
Next week. We'll be sending you some good love and energy your way. And it's been really great to have you guys both here. So we'll make sure everybody's heading your way. Otherwise, gentlemen, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much
for having us on.
Really appreciate it.
All right, guys. Take care. All right. So that was Tristan and Jason. And of course, they're over at Empower Oversight. And we're very grateful for them and their time. They have done some awesome work, really nice filings, some beautiful statements, and some great work from some very important players on our side. So, my friends, thanks for joining us. Thanks for hanging with us while we did a little bit of a different panel interview. I thought that was a really, really instructive conversation, and I learned a ton on that. Hopefully you did too. In fact, let's see what you say about this. See what some of these comments look like over on the YouTubes. We pulled some of those up, but let's see what else you guys had to say about this. Hey, Sheila Poo, amazing. You brought in 10 new membos. Welcome aboard, Sheila Poo. Sheila Poo, welcome aboard to the 10 new membos that Sheila brought in. Grateful to have the 10 new membos. And Sheila, thanks for being here. Glenn Croy also brought in 5 more membos. Glenn, thank you for that, Glenn. And Sheila says, new membos welcome, share and like. And if you are ever in a position to pay it forward, then please do it. Thank you, Sheila. Sheila, you're so generous bringing in so many new membos. Hey, new membos, we'll see you tomorrow on the members only stream in the morning, Saturday stream. In fact, is it going to be a Saturday stream? Let's see. Oh, we might do a full public stream tomorrow. We're going to figure out the time. All right, so we'll come back on that. But thank you, new membos. New membos, check out the stream from this morning. We had a lot of fun this morning too. Hey, Gloria B. What's up, Gloria B? Welcome aboard to 5 new membos. Gloria B is a membo, bringing in 5 new membos. Thank you, Gloria, for doing that. Sheila Poo says there's 4,000 people in the chat and there's only 1.3 thousand likes. So hit that like button, baby. Thank you, Sheila, for the reminder. And my friends, listen to Sheila. She knows what's going on. Peter Roden. What's up, Peter? 11 months as a membo. That's almost 1 full year. Happy to see you, Peter. Thanks for being here and for joining us as a membo. We've also got Jack Mack. Here's Jack. Thank you, Jack. And great to see your comments today. Says, when it starts to seem normal that press leaks will happen, we're not in a good place. Seems we're getting dangerously close to that point. Occurrence also seems to be pretty lopsided, but I digress. When it starts to seem normal, it's almost like it's expected now. It's almost like there was a whole series. I think it was with the Trump indictments. Remember the Trump indictments? I think that's what it was, the Trump J6 indictment. We woke up and like every day there was a new story from the Washington Post about what's in the indictment, what's coming, all the things. Like it hasn't even been filed yet. What are you talking about? And there was just story after story about the indictments. It's like, okay. Happening here too. Hey, Tina Sassy says, thanks for a fabulous show, Robert, and Sheila Poo for the membo. 6 months as a membo, Tina, 2/3 of the way to a baby. Thanks for being here. 5 more from you, Sheila? Oh my goodness. Sheila, thanks for bringing in 5 more membos. I don't know how many that is today. but it's a lot. We're grateful to have you, Sheila. Sheila also said, regarding the J6ers, any movement for those convicted under the improper charge per the SCOTUS ruling? Yeah, actually, there have been some. There have been some, I think, reversals on some of those. And I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but yeah, they're slow walking some of those. You're talking about the 1512C issue. There is some motion on that. Yeah, so it's working its way through the system right now. Jack Mack says, I really do wish that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act included political affiliation as a protected class. Do you think that that could ever be possible? Probably not. I think, and a lot of people have some concerns about the Civil Rights Act in general and whether that's ultimately constitutional. But yeah, protected class for politics, probably not. It's a good question, Jack Mack. Civil rights, man, we could do a whole show on the Civil Rights Act. What's up? Jack says, okay, so the FBI cannot go to the media, but didn't James Comey admit that he deliberately leaked information to the media as the FBI director? And we saw that one earlier. And so thank you, Jack, for that one. What a great comment. Some great comments in the house, my friends. Thank you for sending those in over on the YouTubes. And we're grateful for those. Sheila Poo bringing in 10 membos, a lot more than that. Sheila Poo brought in a ton today. Thank you, Sheila. Let's see who's joining us over on the locals. On locals, we had some other comments. Hey, what's up, man? Knox is right about this. Says, great show, Rob. My brain is full. No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. That was a lot of information. Those guys are very smart. See what I say? See what I mean about smart lawyers? See what I mean? Knox, great show, Robert. My brain is full. Tell me about it. Me too. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from those guys. Really, like, wow. NY says, it's interesting how they can fire FBI members that ask questions with the Kelly cart. Meanwhile, in other federal agencies, incompetent workers are more likely to die than to be fired for incompetence. Because they're government employees, you mean? They just are there forever. They can't do anything wrong. Spuds is here. What's up? Says, Rob, we need a new combination Fanny Igloo Cooler WWE wrestling pack. Well, that looks pretty cool. Yeah, I like it. Watching the Watchers. It even has like the W on it. Did you make that? Igloo, the next party, bring the energy with all new undisputed WWE Championship Fanny Pack Cooler. Can we just repurpose that for Watching the Watchers? I'd wear that on the show. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. All right. Thank you for that, man. Those are some great comments. Thank you, Spuds, for sending those in. And we've got some other locals comments that we're going to go say hello to here in a quick second. But my friends, we're going to leave it there. We're going to go over to X. We're going to say what's going on X before we call it a day and head on over to locals for our after party. We have a couple comments. What's up? B. Torn is in the house. B. Torn says, you may be too young to have ever seen one, but never heard of cheating when these vote tally machines were in use. These old machines. Yeah, like, did we have water main breaks and discoveries of like 10,000 ballots back when they counted them by hand? Hey, Not Sure says, great show, always informative. Thank you to the whistleblowers. And Wow, just Wow says, great information. Thank you, Wow. That's a nice compliment too. Yeah, it was a great stream. Those guys were very smart. Very grateful for their time. Very grateful we have them out there doing this important stuff. And so, my friends, it has been a heck of a stream. It's been a beautiful Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for learning all that goodness with our friends from Empower Oversight. Make sure you're checking out the links in the description below. I'd love it if you followed them. I'd love it if you donated something to them. That'd be great because they're doing good work and we want to support them. So, my friends, we're going to leave it there. We are going to go over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our members only after party. And we'd love to see you come over and join us. We are doing a Saturday stream tomorrow, but I think it's going to be a public stream. It's not going to be members only. We'll do a members only after party, of course. But I think we're going to do a public stream because our boy Garrett Ziegler is going to come by. Woo, it's going to be fun. So we're going to hang with Garrett Ziegler tomorrow. We'll figure out what time, but we'll get it scheduled. So we're going to do an extra special Saturday stream. So we'll be back tomorrow with some of that. But my friends, before we wrap it up and leave it there on the day, we want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths. What's up, playing hooky I saw in the house. I saw Zulu out there today. I know Donut Mind Me's over there. Carrie B's in the house. We got our best friends out there modding the fort down for us, and we're so grateful for you guys. Thank you for making the show nice and orderly when we're out there. But we are going to leave it there. We're going over to Locals, watching thewatchers.locals.com. My friends, we will be back tomorrow on Saturday for a special Saturday edition. And in order to do that, we're going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep oh so very well. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.